Hello and welcome to the SMU Video Archive Series. In this series, we interview members of the SMU community who can provide insight into the history of SMU, especially from the perspective of their time at the university. I'm Pam Lange, and today we have with us Charlotte Whaley, Editor Emeritus of Southwest Review and SMU Press. Welcome.
Thank you, Pam.
To be here.
It's wonderful.
Now, you were not born in Dallas. You were not a Texan. You came here as a child, right?
That's right. Well, I was 6 years old.
6 years old.
We came down with the first wave of the people seeking oil fortunes. Except my father was a clerk with the oil well supply company. But he was in the middle of the Depression, 1932, and it was hard to find a job. They kept him on, and he was very pleased. He could bring his family down to Texas from Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, Oil City. Oil City was very close to Pittsburgh.
So that's kind of part of Dallas history. The people were coming here.
That's right. They were. And those who did come were fortunate in those years because so many people were out of work.
Right. So instead you came to Dallas with no air conditioning.
No air conditioning. Yeah. Cows on the roads, very few paved roads.
Really?
We'd have to stop and move the cows off sometimes in order to get into the city. And then finding a house was a problem.
But you
and
got
very
a house.
Poor insulation and no air conditioning and bitter winters and hot summers.
No storm windows.
No storm windows and walls would sweat and it was terrible.
It was terrible. So even you remember as a child kind of suffering.
As a child, yes. We all sat around the oscillating fan in the living room trying to stay cool.
And you went to Ursuline Academy.
Yes.
As a little girl, or
this was high school.
In high school.
Went to Holy Trinity Grammar School, and then went to Ursuline, and graduated in 1942, and
right in the middle of the war.
Right in the middle of the war, and took a boy's job, an accounting job, and then in 1945, Whaley came back from the war, and we met, and 6 years later we married.
Right. It took a while. And why didn't you go to college right after Ursuline?
Because of it was important, I thought, to help out with the war effort, and I wanted to make a little extra money, and it just seemed like the thing to do. The thing to do.
So you were kind of Tilly the toiler, but in an accounting office.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So we worked on one of the first computers, a very bulky Moon Hopkins billing machine.
Really?
Very noisy, and we would get out the. We were doing the accounting work for the entire Atlantic Refining Company.
Oh, really? So you were in the oil company too.
Yes, that was where the job was. And, it was interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And it was good, I guess, to get out, make some money, and be able to help out.
I was taking night classes. I took some credits in Spanish at SMU night school, and but I didn't get back to college until. Well, I was a freshman at 40.
You were a freshman at 40. Well, that's when I met you. So that's
when we met.
And I was going to ask you about that you, like I did, married and had children, and then decided to come back to school. And that was not a very, what year was that?
Well, I went back in 1965. I started with a course in bowling. I'd been with the bowling league with the company, and so I knew how to bowl. And I thought, well, I'll ease my way into academia, and did very well bowling.
And bowling, well, that was good.
And then I started taking real courses.
Yeah.
And finished in, I started in 1965, finished in 1970.
And you were basically a freshman.
I was a freshman in 1965.
And that was quite a challenge to have
it was.
A family,
because,
a home,
family.
You
sit next to a student, they'd say, "Well, ma'am, what about so and so?" That was, kind of a shock, but it was exciting and scary and challenging.
Yeah, and it really, I know, going back to school as I did, really changed my life. It made such a difference in everything.
Changed my life too. I was a lot later than you.
Yeah, but it was still.
But it was still a great challenge. Yeah.
And just having all that, I think we were probably the best students they'd ever seen.
Probably.
Because we didn't have all that interest in
the kids hated us because, there went
That's
the curve.
Right. There's where those goody-goodies are doing their work.
Yeah. But it was fun.
It wasn't so usual to do that at that time.
No, we were on the cutting edge.
We really were, to go back to school, and there were a few of us though, and we kind of had a good time.
Yes, we did.
Doing our little classes and
during
projects.
the 60s, when everything was wide open,
Mm-hmm.
all the campuses were complaining about something or other.
That's right, including SMU. It's hard to believe that SMU was, there was a very anti-war movement at the SMU campus, and protests, sit-ins, and that kind of thing. Not as too many, but
not as
but
much
some.
as other universities, but enough.
Right. I remember after Kent State, there were and a lot of people don't realize that there was there really were a lot of people who were very passionate in their feelings at that time. And there we were, right in the middle of it.
The mothers.
The mothers, yes. That was kind of a lot to manage, all those papers and tests and exams and things, but we did it.
My boys were in the school, 7th grade, 4th grade, something like that, and I'd get dinner and step over them as they were watching TV and go to the bedroom and start to study. And I think some of it rubbed off. I don't think, who knows?
Right. I think it. Sometimes you felt, well, it was an awful lot to handle, but I never regretted doing that. It was a lot of fun.
No, it was wonderful.
And then you got when you finished, you got a master's degree in
English.
Actually,
I went to work for the SMU Press and the Southwest Review in 1971, and 72 I started my master's program.
I guess I got that back. Okay.
And took one course a year, and it took me 5 years to do it all, but I got it done. And those were very exciting and busy years.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about the SMU Press. I know you didn't really have in mind that you would work there. It was a little hard to get a job with a degree in English from SMU, your undergrad, your BA.
Exactly, and this opened, thanks to you, I found out about it. You told somebody who told Margaret Hartley I was looking for something, and she called me. And I went down there and started as a receptionist, secretary, coffee maker, gopher,
Xeroxer. Anyway, they had Xerox machines, barely.
Yeah, barely. You had to go upstairs to use
it. That's right, yeah.
And 3 months later, then I went into the editorial department as editorial assistant.
Okay.
And I was there until 1983.
Well, tell us a little bit about Margaret Hartley and Ellen Maxwell. What kind of a place? Well, SMU Press has a wonderful history. Yeah. And I'm not sure people realize, or the Southwest Review as well.
Yes. They were extremely intelligent people. They very professional, and yet you didn't feel like you were under a hammer all the time. Alan had a genius for detail. Yeah, he was the editor. He was the director of the press. He was the director. And he also worked part-time putting out the book page for the Dallas Morning News. He'd go down every Wednesday and spend half a day or maybe 2 days down there getting the book page ready. And so that left everything else to Margaret and me, and so we learned to do I learned to do everything. They knew what to do, but they taught me. And I always felt that the SMU Press was sort of an extension of my SMU education because I learned so much about publishing and editing and proofreading and advertising, promotion, writing, photography, everything, because we had to do it all.
Because a small press, you have to do it all. There's nobody else to do it.
That's right.
So how would they decide? Was it pretty much a scholarly press at the time? We could talk about both the press
but
and
at the when I moved into the editorial department, there was no extra money to publish books. Okay. We could only do a book if we had a subvention of some kind. And we didn't want to be a vanity press. We couldn't accept money from the author. No. So we would scrounge around and try to get grants and contributions from outside sources who were interested in a particular book. And we did, several books a year, plus the Southwest, 4 issues of the Southwest Review. So it kept us very, very busy.
That is a lot of books.
But we were always wishing that we could do more books, and there was always the budget problem.
Because I guess the press and the Southwest Review were that I guess they always existed, but they weren't exactly a central part of the
yes,
university.
They were sort of put off to one side. We were in the basement of the Science Information Center for one thing, but we loved it because we could have some very nice birthday parties and Christmas parties, and a lot of the professors were invited to them, and they loved to come down and chat, and so it was a nice atmosphere.
And how about, I remember you talking about the first book that you were in charge of editing or designing. You even did that.
Yeah. Oh,
you just
yes.
copied
yes.
one. You took
I'd see something come in from Knopf or Simon Schuster, and I said, "This looks good." And I'd put it on a special shelf. And then when we needed a book jacket, I'd say, "Well, how about this? And let's change the colors and the typography." And we had a jacket.
Well, they were beautiful books because you used the SMU had its own letterpress at that time.
That's right. The print shop was completely hot type letterpress, noisy, busy, wonderful to walk in there and smell the ink.
Great, didn't it?
And they did a beautiful job in very constricted quarters, but I love that. And of course they went out of business shortly after I left SMU.
Right. They sold that press, though. I think somebody got it.
Did they?
I think so.
Somebody,
the letterpress. Somebody wanted to buy it.
Good.
And they were able to use it. But
because it's a wonderful art, and but it was an awful lot of work and very messy, and
because each piece had to be set.
Each line, if there was one little tiny error in the line, it had to be taken out, and the whole line had to be reset. So it was time consuming, and
to say the least.
To say the least.
The Southwest Review is letterpress too.
Yes, all these issues are letterpress.
All of the issues were letterpress. Well, what would be in it? How far ahead did you have to start a Southwest Review issue to get it to be that beautiful magazine?
Yeah, well, we started probably 6 weeks to 2 months ahead of the pub date.
Yeah.
And it was always a little flexible. In the autumn issue, we tried to get out before Christmas.
Yes, that's always nice, yeah.
And but we had a little leeway there. And it wasn't a great circulation, but it was enough. It was on par with other journals of its type.
It's one of the oldest journals in the United States.
Yes, it was actually started in 1915 at the University of Texas as the Texas Review, and then came to SMU in 1924, I believe, and they called it the Southwest Review. And John McGinnis, who was a well-known English professor here on campus, started it, brought in Alan Maxwell as his assistant, and Alan was there all of his working days.
Yeah,
his
he was, and
career.
He's still with us.
Yes, he's still with us.
80s,
He's still with us. And he loved books, and he loved everything, collecting the first editions, and of course books would pour into the press from publishers thinking, oh, here's a source for a review.
A review, right?
Well,
you
we could only do
a
few reviews, but it didn't matter. All these books came in, and that was one of the perks of the job. We didn't have a great salary, but we could have a nice book to take home every now and then. And Alan really did, because he got them down at the News as well as SMU Press. So he had a wonderful. He has a wonderful book collection.
He has the supreme book collection, probably. Well, anyone who reviews books or does anything, you have this.
That's
I have
nice.
a house full
yes,
myself,
I know you
as
do.
you do too.
I do too.
But you, I think you were so perfect for that job because you have that wonderful eye, and you did a lot of photography. You started that before.
Well, I got into photography when I was at the SMU Press.
That's what I thought. Maybe.
I learned. I studied under Charlie Debus, who is on campus now teaching photography, and so I just enjoyed it, and so that was kind of a second career for me, actually.
Yeah, to do do photography. You're still keeping up.
And I still
too.
try to do it for various organizations and family
Yes.
and Texas.
And or different little organizations that we've all got.
The Los Dos Homeowners Association.
Exactly. Because you, thinking about the Southwest Review, though, the different, there was poetry, fiction, essays, reviews, photography, a few ads at the back.
Yes.
How did Margaret, I know I have some very old editions of the Southwest Review that I found in somebody's garbage or something. I know they're in I just picked them up at some point, and they seem to have all articles about the Southwest.
Yes.
There are a lot of, Dobie, Baycheck, and all of that.
Yes,
And,
had a strong Southwest focus, and it was good because there wasn't a whole lot being written about the Southwest in those days, and I'm glad that happened.
Yeah.
We always try to have something about the region in the magazine, but as time progressed, we became very cosmopolitan.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Dallas,
it's not
it
wasn't the
as
same
important.
as the old days with the
that's right.
the triune God of
Yes, yeah.
The old Texas writers. It became much more urban state.
Yes.
Just have the cactus and the.
Yeah.
Well, Margaret, though, she took some pretty good stands, didn't she, in the university? When did she start with the?
I think it was in the 40s.
In the 40s.
Because she had a war job out in California. She was kind of the Rosie the Riveter out
there.
Yeah,
she was a Rosie the Riveter.
And then she came to Dallas with a friend, because Dallas was a good place to go for jobs, and it still is. But in those days, it was pretty good. And she was literary. She was very, very bright. She had an IQ off the chart. She was a member of a group. It's not the Mensa group. It's another group, the Terman children, and they follow the person throughout their life.
Oh, I remember. I think I remember that. That she was in.
And so she kept in touch with them. They kept in touch with her until she died. And she was a brilliant editor.
Yeah, she was.
And she just had a wonderful sense of what was really good, and a wonderful editor. And she could, a lot of, and her letters were wonderful.
Now, do you have her letters, or do they?
I have some of her letters. I gave some of them to DeGollier for their archives.
Southwest.
I still have some letters. And but she, people who were rejected would say, I'd rather have a letter of rejection from Margaret Hartley than a letter of acceptance from somebody else, which was a great compliment.
She could be a little acerbic, I guess.
She could.
Yeah, she could.
Oh, yeah, she could. Oh, she had some bad days. We all did.
Well, everybody did. I guess down in that kind of incestuous little you get mad sometimes.
Yeah. But Alan was always in a good mood. I rarely saw Alan in a bad mood. But he went back to his office. He could get away from it all.
He could get away from it. A little fighting that was going on.
Have a donut and some coffee.
Yeah.
And all's right with the world.
And he would be the proofreader. He always said he could find the italic comma.
He could find an italic comma or italic period.
Yeah.
And look down a page and say, oh, is that how you spell America? And find out, the I was left out of America or something like that. And both Margaret and I had looked through it and, to see
Never
it.
saw it.
Alan would always catch it.
I worked with somebody like that, too. It's just a special gift.
Yes, it is. It is. Your eye just picks it up.
How to feel really stupid.
I know.
See?
I know. Yeah, you see what you intended to put there.
I know. You do. You do. So.
But it was an interesting time.
And you and Margaret and you all became very great friends. You were very close with Margaret.
Very close. She had no family,
right?
So we sort of adopted her, and when she died, she didn't have anyone really to look after her. So
you took care of her.
We tried to take care of her. Her other friends, Elizabeth Walmsley, made sure she got that air ambulance back from Denver to Dallas. And then she was in Baylor ICU for a long time.
So that press really became a family.
Yes, it really was. It really was. Joanne Hurd was in the accounting department. Joanne LaGrange, John Lawrence's daughter, was secretary. Bernie Corman was he was the distribution department.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk a little bit about. What about publicity and sales?
There was very, very little money for publicity, and then we had to take care of that also in the editorial department.
Great.
So, and I never, that was not one of my favorite things to do. I didn't mind making up ads, but trying to sell things. That's the hardest part of book publishing.
It is.
Or magazine publishing, selling it. And it doesn't do any good if it sits there on the shelf. It has to be sold. So we worked at that. We all tried. We all worked hard. Bernie just tried to fulfill the orders.
Right.
And then he had Jeannie Milazzo helped.
Yeah,
Lee Milazzo would come down and we'd give him books to review. And then his wife came down and helped package the books. And it was a pretty good operation considering how short-handed we were and how underpaid and overworked.
Well, what's new? I mean,
but that's
this
publishing.
is SMU or publishing in general.
Publishing
I think people
in general.
get into publishing or teaching because they love it and they're not really in it for the
Yes.
money. It would be nice sometime, and I think the little that I've worked with publishing is that you'll have the author from hell who expects to have 1 million books
and
sold.
we had a few of those.
I'm sure you did. Yeah, they think they're prima donna. And,
yes. And they want all the rights, and they want to sell it in paperback and get lots of royalty money.
You're right.
And they have a rude awakening, especially if it's a scholarly book.
Exactly.
And there's just not that much money.
No.
So.
And at Southwest Review, I had a fairly wide distribution, but even so, the journals don't sell that much. And I don't think
libraries are our biggest customers.
Yeah, libraries and I guess small literary bookstores or places like that.
And friends.
Friends, friends who are going to sign up for a subscription. But I think it's important for a university to support the press, and they do, and I think that they're still in existence is wonderful.
And a lot of administrations don't quite understand.
No, they don't, because it's
why the presses, university presses, can't make it on their own. I mean, they're presumably selling books, and so that money should be there to support the press, but it's never enough. And there's just too many other things that have to be paid for.
But as far as prestige for the university, it's certainly there, and you all did such a wonderful job.
It should
and today too, it should be. It's good. I mean,
it should be considered another department.
Really,
another branch of the English department, for example.
It really should, but of course, it's something that they think, well, that's something we could cut. Or we can give them even lower salaries than the people in the English department.
Yeah. They're having so much fun down there; they won't know the difference.
That's right. But creating things of beauty and journals that are challenging. And I think it's very important for a university to do that, and I'm glad SMU has continued to support. There have been a few scary moments, I guess.
There's
different.
every year.
Every year.
There was a budget crisis.
Yeah, sure. Because
we always had friends somewhere in Board of Trustees or somewhere that would keep us going.
Yeah, because
because there's so many people coming in and out of the administration, they have to be educated all over again about what the press does and its particular needs. And
and what the important thing was. Well, you changed from being a secretary accountant to assistant editor, and then at one point you became editor of the
Well, Margaret
Review.
retired. And Alan retired.
Both of them. So you had to do
both. Yes. And so then we were trying to, what's going to happen to the press? They'd always talked about separating the magazine from the book publishing program, and that was fine with me. And so, but we went over a year, because of in limbo, waiting for a decision about what would happen. And they finally made their decision, and they brought in a new director for the press, and a new editor for the Southwest Review, and I left.
Yeah, you left, right? But you had done it for about a year.
Yes, I had done it for 12 years. Let's see, 12 years. Yes, 12 years, and. So, and my husband was retiring.
Right,
and,
so that was...
So we decided, let's just start a little publishing.
We can talk about
post-retirement publishing adventure, and we started Stillpoint Press.
Yeah, and that was, we could talk about that. I mean, is that all of your experience that you had? And of course, Gould, your husband, who was an SMU graduate, very proud SMU graduate.
And was a great collector
and a great collector of books and prints.
And started collecting books when I got interested in books. So we had that going for us. And so we just plunged in and set up Stillpoint Press.
Stillpoint Press, which is, did you have Stillpoint in Santa Fe first, or was that?
Actually, we had built Stillpoint in Santa Fe. And Margaret, one of the last things, you know, when Margaret went into wood carving after she retired, she would do the wood carving and she'd come down to the press. And so when we had built this house outside of Santa Fe, she insisted on doing a little sign for us, and we built a little niche for it. And it was beautiful. It was all hand carved in Garamond, all caps.
All caps.
And she carved it. She carved Stillpoint and then put scallops all around it. She said every scallop was agonizing. It took her a full day to do one scallop.
Oh my
There's
God.
scallops all around the sign. But it's beautiful. It's still beautiful. I keep linseed oil on it regularly.
I didn't realize that she had done that.
That was one of the last things she did before she went to Colorado. She had a place in Colorado, and the altitude
was
too much for her, and she had enlarged heart, and so she became ill in 1983, summer of 1983, and she had a cabin with Helen Holbrook in where was it? Glen Haven, I believe it was. And so they brought her down to the Denver hospital. Helen was ill, so they called me, and I took a plane up there and stayed in the nurses' quarters and read manuscripts for about a week, hoping she would be strong enough to be flown back. And she finally stabilized, and they flew her back. And then she was in Baylor ICU for about a month. And she never recovered. But she was writing messages to me from the bed in the ICU because she has tracheotomy and she couldn't talk. So she would she asked for a pen and she would write out her messages to me. Very correctly. I mean, commas, periods, everything capitalized.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, until she was so weak that it was just sort of a scrawl.
She couldn't do it, but she was quite a.
And she wrote to me, "I am ready to go."
Oh, yeah. So I guess she was, but that she was a great lady, and you know, your relationship, I think, is a wonderful story. You should write it someday, along with some others you've had with people like her.
Yes,
you know, similar great ladies.
Might do that.
And talk a little bit about Stillpoint. What were some of the books that you
started
came out
off
with? They were really beautiful.
We wanted to do fine limited editions and letterpress on beautiful archival type paper and with all cloth bindings. And so we started out doing the Carl Herzog book, the
beautiful book.
Remembering Carl Herzog. He had just died.
Yeah.
And he was the premier Southwestern topographer. And so we talked to him just before he died, and he gave us permission to do this. And Al Lohman had a piece in a obscure magazine about Carl Herzog. So we had him take that and enlarge it a bit and put it in between beautiful covers. And
gorgeous, yeah. And
we sold out almost immediately.
That's right.
$100 a pop.
Oh, wow. Yeah, things are
with
looking
dust
up.
jack and everything. Oh, this is easy.
This is easy, but
well,
then it really was.
Then we decided we would do a collection of the Texas Institute of Letters prize stories edited by Marshall Terry.
Right.
And we thought that was a great idea. And then we thought we'd do O. Henry's Texas Stories.
That's right.
And see, these were all so-called trade editions.
That's right, not the fine books.
Which was right outside of our, in other words, we tried to straddle two areas there, and we shouldn't have. because it's very hard to sell trade books in bookstores of that type. And the O. Henry book did pretty well, though.
It did.
O. Henry's Texas Stories.
O. Henry, Texas.
The poor Texas Institute of Letters prize-winning stories didn't do that well.
No,
I mean, they were beautiful stories.
It's a beautiful book, and they're good stories.
Yeah, had great reviews, but it just did not sell that well.
Well, I think that's one of the things people don't realize. I'm going to get rich, you know.
Yes.
I'm going to start a publishing company.
Yes.
Well, good luck.
Yeah,
you know?
and people still think, oh, these publishing companies. Well, maybe some in New York are making lots of money.
Well, yeah, and some
but
things,
little
but
publishing companies
it's,
are.
You know, really hard to make.
We used to say our long-term goal was to break even.
Break even, yeah.
And we said that to the day we closed.
That's right. So when you had some other you had the Stanley Marcus book. And,
that was the last book.
Tom Lee.
That was the last book. Yeah. We published a book of Tom Lee's, two of his war stories called Battle Stations.
Yeah, that's a wonderful
It did
book.
very well.
Yeah.
And then we published a book of poetry, Neva Harrington.
Neva Harrington, who taught
Blue
here
Stone,
once years ago.
Taught in the English department. And it was a fine collection of poetry, got a great review from, is it not Thomas Wolfe? Who is the great reviewer, critic, poet, anyway.
Well,
I can't think of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, it came out in the New York Times, and she was ecstatic.
I'll bet. And she sold all those. They sold out.
She would give readings and sell them.
Yeah, sure.
And but when I called her and told her that the ad would appear in the New York Times, that was one of the high points of being a publisher.
Sure.
To tell a first published poet that her work was going to be reviewed.
Yeah.
In the
well,
New York,
it's a wonderful book. It really is. That poem. Bluestone is a good poem.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
It really is.
A lot of very good poems in there.
Right. She's a good poet. But of course, everybody says don't ever publish
Yeah.
poetry.
Well, right.
You know?
And I knew that. And hardcover at that.
Hardcover.
I mean, paperback's bad enough
nice
to sell,
edition.
but hardcover was really hard. But anyway, we got, thanks to Neva, we sold those.
Sold those out.
And then we did, Gould.
Gould
did a biobibliography of the William D. Whitliff in the SMU Press. And Bill Whitliff was the one who wrote the screenplay for Lonesome Dove, the television play for Lonesome Dove. And he did, it was an annotated bibliography. He spent a long time on it, did a beautiful job on it. And the libraries had to have it.
Right, so that's whole.
And the book collectors, we did a number of slipcase books, and they all had to have that. So we sold out of those. But then we had, maybe 150, 200 that just sat there.
Right.
And poor Assoteria.
Poor Assoteria, the wonderful book of salads from
Bird Bull Press, elegant book, gorgeous book, won a American Institute of Design Award, and still, you know, it just we had a problem with the packaging of it when they sent it down to us. They didn't put paper in between, and so we had most of the covers were damaged.
That was really terrible.
It was a great loss. And because the book was expensive, very, very expensive. Well, that's great. We learned the hard way.
Yeah, I can remember all those days with you're worrying about your computer program, because this was back in the 80s.
Yes.
And of course, they didn't have computer programs like they have now. You had to have one that was made up by somebody. Remember?
The first computer we bought was an IBM. We had to know what key to punch.
That's
there was no instructions. Nothing.
I had to have those keys written on the board. I couldn't read.
It was terrible.
Yeah, they were terrible.
And I had the woman who set it up for me over just about every day, saying it's crashed again, it's crashed again, and but we got through it. And just as I was closing out the press in 1997, closing it down, it crashed.
It crashed completely.
All my records were on there.
Oh, that's so awful.
And I had to get a new computer and try to get somebody to transfer what we had.
Well,
we
I remember
managed to
that
get through it, but
yeah.
it was you talk about bad times.
Oh, that was awful.
Terrible
And
time.
I
for
think
it
I
to
remember
crash.
it was moaning and carrying on, and we just went through the crash of a computer, which is the worst thing. I mean, there's that stuff, you know.
Yeah, fatal error.
I know, that's what it said. Some of your files are corrupted.
Yes. Yeah. They're the words they use.
The way they use
error.
it, you know, or missing or corrupted. Take your pick, whatever it is, it doesn't work. Right. Now you, so your career has encompassed editing and photography and running a press, doing all the books, selling, all of that. And you also managed in that time to write a book.
Yes.
As well. So why don't we talk about that a little bit?
I wrote a book about the woman who homesteaded our land outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And her name was Nina Otero Warren. She was hyphenating her name when it wasn't fashionable back in the 20s. And I was going to do a little chapbook for the neighbors out there, and I started reading about her and saw that she was very, very much a mover and a shaker in the Santa Fe area. She was an educator, she was a politician, she was a writer, she was a matriarch. She and her friend Mamie homesteaded 1,257 acres outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Quite amazing, because they had to carry that water.
They had to carry water out from town. They did have Mamie's old Chevrolet.
Oh, okay.
And that was in the 1929, 1930. And then they lived out there for 5 years, half a year. They didn't spend the bitter winters out there. And they improved. They put a barbed wire fence around the whole area, had it surveyed, and then claimed it as their own.
They homesteaded.
They homesteaded it. And Mamie died first and then willed everything to Nina. Nina had no children, so she willed it to her nephews, Berger and Jack Kenny. And Berger Kenny and his wife opened up the phase one where we built the first house. So it all tied in, and I thought it was important to write about her. And the University of New Mexico Press published it, thank goodness.
Yes, well, that was good.
Yeah,
right?
that was good.
Just set it right off. And
because I didn't want to publish it.
No,
knowing how hard it would be to sell.
Exactly.
And so that was good. I was glad we were able to do that. And the family's a huge extended family, the Kenny family.
Yeah.
And her family went way back, one of the first people to come.
That's right.
To New Mexico, the Lunas and Oteros, and so it was historically it was extremely interesting.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book. Wonderful book. They did a wonderful job. I know you were pleased with the way they did. They didn't exactly promote it, of course. You can understand
promote it,
that,
but I understand University presses how hard it is for them to promote books.
Yeah, but they do the usual. They take it to the show and do a little catalog.
Oh, yes.
But that's
right.
Send it out for review. But that's about all they could do.
Yeah.
And so you managed to cram that into all of your other.
Yeah, I look back and I don't know how I did that.
I'm not sure. You've always been so tenacious. Well, you don't give up. If it's not right, you're going to get it right, and you're going to finish the project. So it's a very good quality.
I had a lot of energy too, a lot more than I have now.
Well,
I had a lot of energy in those days.
But you've been working on some other projects recently, haven't you?
My husband has Alzheimer's disease, and that's why we had to close our press in '97, and I'm reading everything I can find out about that and taking notes, and maybe someday I'll be able to write something that would help other people come along.
Well, I know it's a hard time, but just going over, look at all that you've accomplished. Yeah. And it's not over.
Well, doing this makes me realize, that did happen.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Well, it's been great. We're in.
Well, thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed
overtime.
Yeah.